Our guest today is the Superintendent of the Chicago Police Department. He has served as Superintendent for 4 years. Our guest today began his career in law enforcement with the New York Police Department 25 years ago. He was raised in the Bronx by his father, a World War II Marine, and his mother, a nurse. He is so smart that he brought his wife with him today. Kristen, where are you? There we go. Thank you for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, Superintendent of Police for the City of Chicago, Garry McCarthy. Garry? All right, thanks.
You know, I got so much material in the last 5 minutes, I don't even know where to start. First of all, Jay, my goal here is to not make a headline today. So let's keep that in mind. I'm sorry if I disappoint. Although you never know. And Tim, thanks for stealing my thunder. I am the McCarthy of the day, though, all right? You're not going to be invited to Thanksgiving dinner now. I heard there was a hockey game last night, and just to give you an insight into what my life looks like these days, besides wonderful life I have with Kristen, when I see her, which is pretty rare, I didn't realize that last night after my community meeting, when I got home and I focused on looking at my speech, that I forgot that the Hawks were playing until this morning when I was brushing my teeth. And I found out that they did triple overtime and won, which is great. I'm getting a little excited. It'd be great to see the Hawks play the Rangers. And I want to be clear what side of the ball I fall on. I'm a big Hawks fan. So that would be great. But anybody who watched that entire game last night, I will forgive you if you fall asleep today. Those of you who did not, I expect you to stay awake, so thank you. So, you know, right now, we are in probably the most challenging time for policing in this nation's history. And I got to tell you, I'm going to tell you about some of the good things we're doing, but I know that we can do better. And I know that we can do a lot better. But if you look at what happened in Ferguson with Michael Brown, how there was a complete lack of transparency regarding that shooting, which results in a vacuum being filled up by other things, which may not be factual. And if you look at the way that those protests were policed, we made, and I'm talking about law enforcement, enormous mistakes there. And one of the things that I'm fond of saying is that the police can turn a demonstration into a riot. And I think that's what we saw. It doesn't mean that riot may not have happened in Ferguson, but police certainly did something to exacerbate that situation. And if you watch what we did during NATO a couple of years ago, we did exactly the opposite. Confrontation begets confrontation. And this has become a cornerstone of the philosophy of the Chicago Police Department, which I'm going to get into in a little bit. But you follow up Ferguson with what happened with Eric Garner in Staten Island, and then you look at the recent events in Baltimore. There's a big anti-police sentiment both locally and nationally. And we're dealing with protests on a daily basis. And I got to tell you, I'm really proud of our department, the professionalism that they are exhibiting during those protests, the taunts, and you know, just the verbal assaults and sometimes physical assaults that they're encountering. We so far have been able to prevent what has happened in other cities. And my goal, quite obviously, is to continue that trend. So we're getting different results, and it's based upon protecting people's First Amendment right to free speech while preventing criminal activity. You don't put SWAT units on the front line of a protest. You don't bring armored vehicles to a protest. And you certainly don't put snipers on top of armored vehicles pointing rifles into crowds and expect that you're not going to exacerbate a situation. So what's happened nationally is that people are focused on police-community relations. And I got to tell you, we can always do better, as I said. But body cameras are not going to change what's happening in this country. There are much deeper social, economic, and political issues that are at hand here. And policing is certainly a subset of that, and we can definitely do better. But what's happening is that we have disenfranchised communities in this country that are suffering miserable conditions for a number of reasons. And it includes poverty, a lack of education, the breakup of a family unit, ongoing and rampant violence, ineffective gun laws, rampant narcotics use, failed government programs, mass incarceration, which is a huge issue. And as I've said in the past, and I'll say again, our war on drugs in this country has been a wholesale failure. And there have been incredible unintended consequences of that effort. We also have, and this may be a little bit offensive to some people, but we have an ineffective criminal justice system in this country. When 26% of the inmates at Cook County Jail are incarcerated for narcotics-related offenses, and only 3.8% are incarcerated for gun offenses, the question becomes, what is the goal of the criminal justice system? Is it to reduce gun violence? Or is it to lock up people for narcotics and narcotics use? Now, I am not endorsing narcotics, don't get me wrong. But I think what I learned about systems is that systems will result in what it's designed to produce. And it's not producing the intended results that we want. So all of these factors together create a volatile cocktail of anger and frustration in disenfranchised communities suffering through those conditions. And what's not being said in this country is the role of race in what's happening. And if you take those conditions that I mentioned and you view them through the prism of 300 years of history of the African American experience in this country, what you have is a real bad condition. And it results in something, and by the way, we make it worse now. The police make it worse. You know, something dawned on me some years ago, that I was 4 years old, and I know I'm not the youngest person in this room. Don't say anything, Kristen. I know I'm not the youngest person in this room, but segregation was legal in this country when I was 4 years old, when LBJ signed the civil rights legislation in 1963. And who was it who was enforcing those laws? It was the police. So viewed through this prism, all these experiences that are going on today, we have a problem. And then what do? We make it worse. We do things wrong. We could definitely do better. I say it all the time, and I'm going to say it about 10 times during this speech. John Burge. You know, John Burge left this police department more than 20 years ago, and we're still paying for that in a number of ways, both financially and certainly as far as what people think about policing in this country. Look at some of the other experiences, Rodney King and what happened there. So all of these conditions result in something called, and this is a little bit deep, legal cynicism, which some of you may be familiar with, but I'm going to try and boil it down. It's a philosophy that a fellow named Andrew Papachristos at Yale was instrumental in developing, which has it that the disenfranchised community is looking at the system, the entirety of the system, government. Who's providing protection for them? What type of quality of life do they have? They suffer all of these conditions, and they become cynical about the system, which is understandable. But what is the most visible arm of that system? It's the police. It's the police. And as a result, the focus goes on to the police. If you look at what happened in Ferguson, everybody was upset that the officer was not indicted. But it was anti-police protest. So at the end of the day, we have to take a deeper dive. We have to acknowledge that putting body cameras on the police is not going to fix what's happening in this country today. We have to acknowledge the role of race in this. We have to acknowledge the disenfranchised communities that are suffering under these horrible conditions. And we can do better. So what has CPD done that's putting us in the position that we're in today, which can change at any moment, but knock on wood, we're doing pretty well. I talked about this in the past, and I believe that we're on the cutting edge of policing and at the forefront as far as community policing is concerned. I'm not going to take you through everything that we've done because I've done it here. I think this is my fourth appearance or third appearance here, Jay. I've talked about this. When I got here 4 years ago, I talked about a return to community policing. And I talked about the fact that we were not structured to deliver community policing. And many of you here in the room are businessmen, and I'm running a business. I'm running a $1.4 billion business. And I'm designing my systems to produce the results that we're looking for. Well, we had these task forces that were doing all of our enforcement. They could be on the west side today, they could be on the south side tomorrow. Zero connection with the community. Zero connection. And where did those task forces come from? They came from beat officers in districts. So our system that we were using had it that those task forces did all the enforcement, and what they would do is what was considered or is considered those heavy-handed tactics that the police use to do enforcement, and the beat officers in the district were relegated to simply handling calls for service and doing nothing else because there were too many calls and not enough beat officers. So we called a halt to that. I broke up those task forces. We put those officers back in the districts. We put the same officers on the same beat every single day, gave the resources to the district commanders, and hold them accountable for what's happening. This allowed our officers to connect with the residents and really get to know the community. They could tell the good kids from the bad kids rather than just coming in and stopping everybody. We created a new training on how our officers interact with the community. And this is something that is going really, really well. Police legitimacy and procedural justice. If you're familiar with it, I could boil it down to one tenet. It really has something to do with how you do something rather than what it is you're doing. It's giving people a voice. It's talking about every interaction as a teachable moment. It's treating people with respect. Every officer in the department has now been trained in this program. It was developed by Tracy Mears and Tom Tyler in conjunction with our training unit in the CPD. And police leaders from across the country are coming to look and take this training back to their departments. We've now finished phase one of that, and we're starting phase two. It's going to be an ongoing training as we move forward. And right now, what we're doing that's going to be a little bit different is just like we developed an anti-gang violence reduction strategy. You've heard me speak about that. Very complicated, forward-thinking strategy. We're doing the same right now regarding community relations. We are actually developing a community relations strategy, and I'm not sure that this exists in most places in the country. So to do that, you might have heard that besides some of the things we've already put in place internally, I've launched an outreach tour. I'm going out every single day to community meetings, sitting down with small groups of residents without the press, without anybody else in the room, just about 20 to 30 people at a time, and we have conversations, and we listen to people, and we talk about what it is we're doing, and we have honest and frank conversation. And trust me, I'm good at honest and frank conversation. Those conversations are going extremely well right now, and I can tell you this, two themes keep coming out of it, and these are things that we're absolutely going to put into our strategy as we move forward. The first thing is, while we've now structured ourselves to deliver community policing, we have to make sure that we're actually doing it, which is getting those officers out of the cars, not just having them in the same cars every day, driving past people and not interacting with them. And the second thing is we're going to develop, and we have some of this, by the way, but we're going to make it better. We're going to do it institutionally across the department. Training for the community, for young men and women, of how to interact with the police, what we're thinking when we conduct a car stop, how you should act based upon our training, and then how the interactions can go if both sides handle it properly. I think that's pretty important. Our procedural justice training is now starting phase two, and like I mentioned, People are coming from across the country to look at it and bring it back. We've also launched a body camera program in the city as a pilot project. We're now expanding it, and what I find fascinating, in the first 90 days of this program, we don't have one good video to show anybody where you say, this is the reason why we need body cams. But what we were able to do is figure out how to implement it and how to spread it out. You know, we're laughing, but that's obviously a good thing, because it's my contention that everybody acts better when they're on film, except for maybe me. These guys are filming me. We're also, and we have, expanded our internal affairs division. It's incredibly important to have internal legitimacy, and that has a lot to do with our discipline system, and it also has to do with treating people fairly and creating a meritocracy within the department, not a political organization, one that's focused on the things that we need to be focused on, not who you know. So what are the results? What is our plan brought to us so far? And what ultimately are the results of executing the strategies that we've now put in place that I told you we were going to do 4 years ago? Well, we ended 2014 with historic lows in crime and violence. You know this, we talk about it. We had the fewest murders since 1965, a 49-year low. We had the lowest crime rate in this city, overall crime, since 1972. And those are the numbers that we always like to talk about. That's what you see in the paper every day, right? How many people got shot? Are we up? Are we down? What's going on? These are the numbers that are perhaps the most important numbers today. What's behind those numbers? First of all, we've done that. We've reduced crime by arresting less people. We've made 17,000 less arrests over the last 2 years. So what is that telling you? I told you mass incarceration is a huge issue in the community, and rightfully so. But at the end of the day, it's not about arresting everybody. It's not about filling up the jails. It's about arresting the right person at the right place, at the right reason, at the right time, with the right reason, at the right time. Our clearance rates were up 19% compared to 2 years ago. So what does that mean? That means our detectives are solving more crime based upon the fact that we're getting more cooperation from the community. It also has to do with some training and supervision and more detectives, but it's obviously a fact that it's working. This is the one that I love to talk about. Complaints against our officers by civilians are down 20% over the last 2 years. So what are we doing? We're arresting less people, we're arresting them for the right reason, we're getting better results, and we're doing it in a method that's not offending the community at the same rate that we used to offend them, let's put it that way. Because at the end of the day, we still have a lot of work to do. So we're providing respectful policing. This is an important one in this environment. Police-related shootings were down 39% in 2014 in comparison to 2011, when we got here 4 years ago. And this year, in 2015, we're down an additional 40% on top of that. So what did those numbers look like? That means that this year, so far, we have been in 5 shootouts where we shot somebody, compared to 21 at this point in 2011. Out of those 21 shootouts in 2011, we had 9 fatalities. So far this year, 1. That's really important, because what we're talking about is training, policy, and supervision that is producing the results that we're looking for. One of the first things that we did when we got here was we added a third training cycle to the 2 that existed already for the officers. It had everything to do with tactics. We changed some of the policies on use of force, and these are the results that we're getting. This is progressive policing. We're doing it with officers on the beat. We're doing it in a fashion that the community likes. But we still have a lot of challenges, and yes, we can do better. So what are the challenges? We want everybody to feel safe in this city, but changes need to take place, and you know where I'm going. We need stronger gun laws to address the violence. This hasn't changed in the 4 years that I've been talking about it, and it must. We seize more guns than any city in the country every year. We seize 7 guns to every one that New York seizes, 7 to 1, and 3 to 1 compared to Los Angeles. In the first quarter of 2015, the number of shootings and murders in the city rose from those lows that we had last year. It's now plateaued. It's starting to come down. I'm pleased with that, but we still have a lot of work to do. And it's important to remember that. When you hear that shootings and murders are up, it's compared to the best numbers we've had since 1965. But this is where it gets a little sketchy. In a city that makes more gun arrests than any city in the country, in the first quarter, we were up 60% compared to last year. 60%, by more than half. We made 692 gun arrests in the first quarter. Out of those 692 gun arrests, we locked up 688 people. Well, you say, how can that be? Because we locked up 4 people twice in the first quarter. 4 people got locked up twice for gun arrests. So by April 1st, the day that the first quarter ended, 59% of those individuals that we arrested with firearms were back on the street by the first day of the quarter. Today, 70% of those individuals are back on the street in the middle of May, 6 weeks later. The 4 people that we arrested twice, 2 of them were back on the street April 1st. 2 of them were back on the street April 1st, and right now, 3 out of 4 are on the street. I'm sorry, if you get arrested with a gun twice in 90 days, you provide a hazard to the public. Somebody needs to recognize that. And by the way, these 688 people had an average of 10 arrests each. So think about that. And these are people we're catching with guns, catch and release, catch and release, catch and release. And by the way, if you get arrested with a firearm, I think you become 4 times more likely to be involved in gun violence again. And there's other factors that you can run through that's obviously going to push that number up. So what are we doing? We're doing all of that, making those arrests. Our officers are putting their lives in danger, and we're shooting less people at the same time. That's a lot of restraint, ladies and gentlemen. I already knew all of this. That's why I lost my, lost my place here. Okay, I guess I'm done. So what else can be done? There's too many examples that teenagers have guns that they use to settle fistfights, and it happens every day in this city. If guns are so easily accessible, these feuds get escalated to a deadly level. We have another challenge, and you may have heard about this. The ACLU is challenging our stop policy. They're challenging our contact card policy. And what I'd like to do is give you a little bit of information about this. And this has become something that we're doing in this country, which is a little troubling. I presume there's a number of attorneys in this room, and you're very familiar with Terry versus Ohio. Terry versus Ohio was a 1968 Supreme Court case that found that the police can stop people based upon articulable, reasonable suspicion. That's the standard that we use. Terry stops is what it's called. Well, what started in New York, and unfortunately has been continued by the Department of Justice, and now the ACLU in Chicago has done the same thing, is they're comparing our stop data to the demographics of the population. Well, that's the wrong data set based upon the Supreme Court. Where do we get reasonable, articulable, or I should say articulable reasonable suspicion? We get it from crime data. You get robbed, you tell me who robbed you, I go out and I look for the person. That's crime data. Well, here's what we did. We took our crime data and we ran the demographics of the crime data and we compared it to our stop data. And what we found across the city, in the entirety of the city, and the best examples where we took Englewood, the most violent community in the city, where we struggled the most with gun violence, and we compared it to Lincoln Park, one of the best communities in the city as far as crime is concerned. And what we found is our crime data and our stop data matches up almost precisely to within 1 or 2% of what we have. And what's frustrating is that if we stop people based upon the population demographic, the Supreme Court would probably say that that was unconstitutional. But this is a standard that is being used to compare it. And I want you to think about something. If we're getting the most guns in the country, and we have, by the way, this is not an either-or proposition. You can't have, we can't do anything but do constitutional policing. We can't stop people based upon the fact that we just feel like stopping somebody. But at the end of the day, I want you to think about what happens if we didn't get those 688 people off the street. Even for a short time in that first quarter, what would have happened with gun violence in this city. So we're going to see what's going to happen moving forward. We've revised our policy in a number of different ways. We've created another standard based upon a national standard, which, by the way, we're the largest police department that's seeking something called accreditation, CALIA accreditation. And I forget what CALIA stands for, but at the end of the day, it's the Good Housekeeping Seal of Approval for policing. It looks at every one of your policies and everything that you're doing, and it takes about 2 years to actually get the accreditation, and they come in and they say, yes, you're doing this right. We're about 10 months into it at this point, Bobby, and we're the largest department in the country that is pursuing it. So what's going on in Chicago? We've made a lot of progress in recent years, but we have much more work to do. And as we continue to move forward, support from the community is essential. Certainly in this place and time, those numbers that we just talked about might be more important than the crime numbers. And I'm not willing to say that anything's more important than saving a life. But at the end of the day, this is the way to do policing. This is what we should be doing. And we're doing it in a fashion right now where we're asking the community, what is it that you want us to do? Tell me, and we're going to put it into our policies. To me, that is community policing. But we need help from the public regarding sentiment and firearms. We can definitely do better. But we have constructed a policing methodology that produces crime reduction, does it with compassion, and does it with less complaints against our officers who are making less arrests and gaining greater cooperation from the community. But it's a process, and it's something that we have to work on and continue to work on, and the public has to do the same thing. We have to have a recognition of where we are. We have to have a recognition that we've had problems in the past, we still have problems, but we're making progress. One of the things you constantly hear me talk about is progress, not success. I don't know when we could ever declare success. Probably when nobody gets shot in the city and when nobody gets a complaint against a police officer. That would be success, and I could declare it. But at the end of the day, we can all do better. Thank you.
Okay, if we have our, questions, I don't know why that was such a controversial subject. We have Judge Judy Rice here. Her dad was Fred, old friend of mine, former police superintendent. Judge Rice, where are you? She's here, right, Jay? She just left.
She saw you come up and she left.
It never ends, does it? By the way, I think that you should go on the River Monster show. You know, the guy who goes to the river to catch, because the way you describe it, Chicago is like fishing, catch and release. All right, I'm not the superintendent, okay? I stayed up and watched that game.
I'm just going to let you hang there, Paul.
Right. Well, it's still better to see you when both of us are fully dressed. Okay. East Bank Club working out. Yeah, I mean, knock it off. All right, here we go.
It's terrible.
No, not anymore. It's a new day. Okay, John Hammerschlag, City Club member. Oh, right off the bat. How do you identify with Tom Selleck and Blue Bloods? Similarity and differences. Thank you for your service. You get hardball questions here, Superintendent.
He's got a great mustache. And Paul pointed out to me that this is a Blue Bloods Tom Selleck looking tie, so I guess I got that going for me too.
Okay, I didn't spend 4 years at the academy for nothing, almost. Bruce Handler, MD, tell us more about the CIT CBD program. How is it working out?
So that's something that was in my notes that I actually skipped over when I was talking about how we're reducing our shooting numbers. CIT is a training that has to do with how we interact with the mentally ill. And mental illness and crime go hand in hand. We have a big problem as far as how we handle it. And time again, and there's videos out there, and I know of specific instances where we end up shooting and killing people who are mentally ill because they want to be shot. It's called suicide by police. And de-escalating those situations is critical. And I forget the numbers. Bobby, how many do we have CIT trained now? 6,000. We got about 6,000 officers who are CIT trained, and out of those 6,000, an additional 2,000 have gone to a second level of juvenile CIT training, because we're seeing younger and younger individuals, first of all, involved in crime. It's not unusual for us today to lock up 10 and 12-year-olds with firearms and have 13 and 14-year-olds involved in murders and gun violence at a level that is just obviously unacceptable. But the CIT training is a critical component to how we're doing, and we're expanding our training of our officers regarding that. That has a big reflection on those shooting numbers.
Okay. Michael Chiappetta, close, from Accenture. How does or will the CPD leverage technology to help police officers be more effective and efficient? Again, thank you for all of your amazing work. You didn't set these up, did you?
Yeah, I did. $20 a pop. So technology, we actually are doing extremely well in technology, knock on wood, but it's incredibly expensive. You all know by the time you buy an iPad or whatever component you buy, it's outdated by the time you get it home and take it out of the box. Think about having the second largest police department in the country and trying to do state-of-the-art type technology, which is a good pitch for our police foundation. I see John shaking his head. And Mary Ann Rose is here, who's going to be our director of the Police Foundation, that raises funds. It's a public-private partnership, and Rich is here also, raises funds from the public to support, not supplant, things that are not in our budget, like technology. We have a really good, we have a really good tech guy. I got to tell you something. He's a uniform guy who we recently went outside the normal career path, and we actually promoted this guy to make sure that he didn't retire, because we need to keep him. And he's done a wonderful job as far as keeping us kind of near the forefront nationally on what we can do with our technology, and it's a big lift. But through our technology, one of the reasons why our arrests are down is because we've actually developed methodologies using algorithms and social networking, believe it or not, and looking at criminal histories of individuals to be able to identify 400 people in this city who are 500 times more likely to be involved in gun violence as a victim or an offender. I'm going to say that again. It's actually 500 times and up. I think the top end stops at 800. We haven't, there's no reason to go much further than being 800 times more likely to be involved in gun violence. Those are the individuals that we're focused on. And we're focused on them in two different fashions. First of all, if they're wanted, we go and arrest them, right? If they're involved in narcotics, we'll do a case and we'll try and arrest them. But the other thing we're doing, and you want to talk about community policing, is we're doing home visits. We go to their houses and we sit down with their family and we say, this young man is more than 500 times more likely to be involved in gun violence, and he's going to die unless something changes. And we can say with empirical certainty right now that 25% of the individuals on that list will be involved in gun violence within the next 18 months as a victim or an offender. And we're getting better and better at this. This plays so perfectly into our philosophy, which is not arrest everybody, arrest the right people, because that's what the community wants. I've never been to a community meeting, well, now that's changing, where somebody doesn't raise their hand and say, why are you stopping my son? You know who the criminals are, but you drive right past them. The community wants us to get those people off the street. They don't want us to get everybody off the street, and that doesn't serve our purpose. So technology is helping us identify those individuals, and that's who we're dealing with. It helps in every fashion of everything that we're doing. It certainly helps us to develop patterns and trends of crime so that we can deploy to the right places at the right times. I mean, technology is really a cornerstone of what we're doing today.
Here's a specific question. You ready for it? Here we go. Residents in West Pullman. Oh, first of all, Jeff Hamera, where are you? Jeff? All right. Good. Residents in West Pullman have said they liked the CAPS program, but the process was infiltrated by gangs, which led to intimidation. How can CAPS be improved?
Well, I don't know how, Jeff, how recent this is?
The feedback I got was in the last couple of months.
Really? All right, well, we're going to take a look at what's happening down in the 5th District as far as CAPS is concerned. But the CAPS program, you know, CAPS was a great program, and it still is a good program. But I don't want a community policing program. I want a community policing philosophy that imbues the entire department. And everything that we're doing is focused on giving district commanders the resources to make things happen. And that's what we did with CAPS. Rather than it being a centralized group down in headquarters, we put it into the districts, and the district commanders are now running the CAPS program. We just appointed a new deputy chief to oversee it in the Bureau of Patrol. So I think CAPS is local, just like all politics, right? What happens on the northwest side is going to be completely different from what's happening on the southeast side. And therefore, we needed it not to look the same in every single district, and that's what we've done. We're still developing it. I haven't got it to a place where I absolutely love it, but with the new community relations strategy that we're putting together, it's going to be really defined how we do CAPS, and I think it's going to be a much better product.
Hard to believe it. I'm going on the limb saying you've probably never had a question like this. Don Davis from the Bronner Group, well, that figures. Are you familiar with the theory that lead poisoning of youth significantly contributes to violent crime?
Yes.
Well done. Okay.
And I'm also familiar with Freakonomics that had Roe versus Wade. Has a lot to do with the crime reduction that's happened recently. I kind of study this stuff. I don't know.
I set it up pretty good for him, didn't I? Yeah, okay. Couple of more. From Dorian Dickinson, City Club member. How can the Chicago Police Department introduce a mobile solution that will encourage citizens to provide more tips and help break the code of silence?
Oh, really good stuff. So we're actually, and I mentioned, his name is John Lewin, and he's developing platforms for us that we haven't had before. You look almost like John. We now have a much better social network component. If you go to our website, chicagopolice.org, and take a look at it, you can do everything from make a complaint against an officer to send us tips on crime. We're doing social networking at the same time because, believe it or not, sometimes everything we say doesn't come across in the press. So we're kind of pushing the messages out ourselves at the same time. And I think that's really critical to our success. But those platforms are making a big difference moving forward. And it's really in its infancy, but I have great expectations for it. The social media aspect of what we're doing kind of goes everywhere.
Okay, 2 quick questions. We have Tony Irving. You come from Get In Chicago. Better to be from Get In Chicago than from Get Out. Okay. What are the practices you find most effective in building trust between the community and the police? So to summarize your speech.
Well, yeah, it's kind of everything we do, Tony. But I think one of the things that it served me very well in my life is sports. You know, we play basketball with kids. I think probably most of you have seen some of the tweets that went out regarding some of our officers in uniform playing football and softball with kids while they were working on a beat. that only happens, by the way, because of social media, right? And, you know, Tony and I have had discussions, and one of the things that struck me was a couple of years ago, and I haven't been able to get it off the ground because I've been a little bit too busy, is I went to, Kerry Wood has a clinic every summer down in Ogden Park in Englewood. And I went down there a couple of years ago, and he had about 200 kids for this clinic. And I naturally expected that in this huge park with so many fields, that there would be a Little League. And there was no Little League in that neighborhood. And, you know, I think back to my youth and the things that kept me from getting in trouble. I still got in trouble, but sports made all the difference. When I went to a different high school than the kids who I grew up with, and I played football and baseball and ran track and played basketball, I didn't have a lot of time to get in trouble, but I also found something that really inspired me. And as a result, I can draw a direct connection between a lot of my friends in a different way in the Bronx, and here I am today. So to me, sports is a critical component of it. In the NYPD, where Bob Tracy worked, Chief Bob Tracy, who's the Chief of Crime Control Strategies for us, he was in the 34th Precinct, and there was an officer who was killed there named Michael Buzek. And the police officers got together with the community, and they started a Little League. And that Little League is thriving today, and it's coached by volunteer officers. That's the type of model that I want to bring to Chicago, whether it's basketball, football, or baseball, or whatever sport it could be. But you know, I always tell kids to try and find something that inspires them. Might not be sports, it might be dancing, it could be art, it could be anything, right? And let's see if we can get involved in it.
Okay. Mr. Superintendent, one last question. You may not be able to answer it, but it's a good question. Ed Tracy, to the extent you can discuss, what are the number of credible city-wide threats that the CPD faces on an annual basis? And how does it compare nationally? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I can, and I'm not going to answer the question well, I will answer the question specifically. We have not received a specific threat to Chicago since I've been here. But I could tell you this, we are so much better at what we're doing regarding counterterrorism today than we were back on 9/11. And you know, I had the fortune and misfortune of being in the NYPD during 9/11. I was at the World Trade Center. I was number 3 in the agency at the time. And I can tell you this, we had a lot of problems as far as communicating with some of the federal authorities who were in charge of counterterrorism investigations, whether it was at home or overseas. Today, we all have top secret clearances. And when I say all of us, I mean a number of key figures at the top of the Chicago Police Department, including myself and Bob. And we actually have something I probably shouldn't talk about. We have a secure room where we can share that information. I get a weekly briefing on all the counterterrorism threats and everything that's going on across the country, because terrorism is not limited to one city. If you think about it, the attacks in New York came from overseas, is where they were hatched. They were hatched in places like Germany. So the international threat picture is what we stay on top of, not specifically what's happening in Chicago, though obviously we do, but it's more important what's happening all around us. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of things going on, and if you look and listen to the news, there's a lot of people being arrested for attempting to go overseas and fight with ISIL or al-Nusra or some of these other organizations that are posing threats to our security. So it's a little bit disconcerting, and it's very concerning. And by the way, they use social media to attract people to go over there. We've had a lot of local folks who we've actually arrested. And I say we're working in a joint terrorism task force with a number of departments across the region and the FBI. So we are up to date on it. And quite honestly, nothing has been a credible threat to Chicago yet, but we're always watching and putting things in place to make sure it doesn't happen.
How about a big round of applause for our people? We got some prizes.